guys, well, we're going to do a little bit of a different type of video today. We're going to talk about some of the relics that I found in the water this past summer and some actually that I found the summer before that. And I hope you'll enjoy the video as we go through each of these finds. Now, I didn't get out very often in the water this past summer, but when I did, I seemed to do really, really well. Had a great summer of finding relics. And as we go around and I talk about each type of relic that I found, I'll explain what I know about these. But almost everything I know about Civil War relics and metal detecting, I learned from Aquachigger. So check out his videos as well. Okay, we'll start by talking about these bullets here, which I found very close to the musket. And I'll talk about the musket in a minute. And also show you a clip in a second of finding some of these bullets and finding the musket. Now these bullets were all in a pile. Most of these bullets here were in this one pile in the river. You can kind of see that one still has the gunpowder on it from where the cartridge had been attached in the water. All of these were in a cartridge box because I found right next to these bullets the cartridge box finial with the leather attached. This is the part of the cartridge box the strap would go over and latch onto to make sure that it didn't open, kind of that the flap was closed. It also had a US cartridge box plate, which Aquachigger ended up finding a few minutes after I had found these bullets. Also found this iron buckle, which still had some of the leather attached, which was part of the cartridge box as well. So it was really cool to find these bullets in that one hole in the river. Really, really awesome. Now this is probably my favorite find I've ever found in the water metal detecting. A Civil War musket. And you can imagine the soldier that dropped this. I mean, that's just incredible that he held this in battle during the Civil War and somehow it ended up in the river. You can see the wood is very shrunken on this. It took me a while to preserve this musket. And how I ended up doing it was kind of soaking it for a few weeks in polyacrylic. And then I would take it out, let it dry a little, and paint more polyacrylic on it. So the wood did shrink as expected. However, it stayed intact, which was good. I didn't lose much of the wood at all. You can see the brass nose cap there, still has the ramrod in it. This I did not find with the musket, but that is an Enfield Tompion, which would go in the end of this kind of musket. You can see some of the cork is left. I actually found this last summer, but that would go in the end of the musket to keep the water out. We have the butt plate, which I found near the musket. It's stamped, I don't know if you can see that, A25 on the top of the butt plate. From my research, I believe that that's Company A of some regiment, the 25th musket issued to that regiment. So that's really cool. That was sitting right where I pulled the musket out, but I found it the next time. I didn't find the trigger guard with the musket. I actually found it the next trip. However, it was right where the musket had been, and I ended up attaching it for display purposes. So that is a really, really cool find. I'm shaking, guys. Unbelievable. Just dug a Civil War musket. First one I've ever dug. Chig has one. He has two breastplates, a bayonet, pieces of a bayonet. This is incredible. Wow. Not sure if you guys noticed, but I left the rocks in the end here between the ramrod and the barrel, just kind of as a memento that I found this in the river and these rocks were encrusted on it, which is really cool. So that is one of my favorite finds right here. Okay, now we're going to go through the artillery shells. I'm going to go through the different types of these and explain what they were and the purpose, etc. And I also have some reference books that I'll talk about. So if you like artillery shells, this part of the video is for you. Okay, so we have two shells here of the same type. These are both Hotchkiss shells. This is just the nose part of it, and this is the entire shell. This one was fired, I found this at a battle site. It very likely was actually fired by Confederate troops, even though this is a Union manufactured shell. The reason why is because that has a wood fuse in it. And Very rarely did Union troops use wood fuses on Hotchkiss shells. So that almost certainly was a captured shell that the Confederates used. This one I found at a spot where Union troops had dropped it. So this has never been fired. This is a drop shell. And you can see we have the nose of the shell, just like this, but it has a lead rotating band or sabot on it, and then a base cup here that would be pushed up by the force of the powder detonating in the cannon. It would expand the lead sabot, which would catch the rifling, send this spinning. The flames from the explosion would go up these grooves, cut into it, called flame grooves, and they'd ignite a paper tube inside the fuse there. And that would burn down for the number of seconds it was cut to until it would blow up over the heads of the enemy, or on an artillery piece, or over horses, or whatever they were aiming at. This is another Union shell here. This is called a Dyer shell, D-Y-E-R. This shell here would have had a lead base cup that went on this. There's also a bit of zinc on the bottom where the lead would have attached, and the fuse adapter is zinc as well. This is very similar to the full Hotchkiss I showed you, where a paper time fuse would have been put in there, and that would have been designed to burn down and then explode. However, what's different about this shell, it weighs quite a bit because this is filled with lead balls called case shot. So those are filled inside the shell, and these could absolutely blow up when the fuse would burn down right over the enemy and cause a lot of destruction. This one, however, did not detonate. It ended up in the river, fired, but did not explode. So it was sitting there 160 years later for me to find it. Okay, we have two more Union shells here. These are called Schenkels. These were the most expensive, one of the most expensive Union shells that were manufactured. However, the troops loved these because they were highly accurate and not very dangerous for the Union troops to handle, since this had a paper mache sabot. You remember on this Hotchkiss here, it has a lead sabot. Sometimes that lead would fly off and hit friendly troops, but the paper mache, of course, would just kind of shear off as it went out of the cannon and didn't do any damage. So this was interesting. These shells are, they were filled with gunpowder, but not those lead balls called case shot like in the Dyer shell. This was just powder designed to explode and fragment this shell into big pieces that would kind of hit the enemy. Interesting is that you see on the top, I don't know if you could read that. It says J.P. Schenkel, patent, October 16th, 1861. That's really cool, and that's very well preserved since this was face down in the mud when I found it. But what you can see, it's interesting here, there's a hole in the top. But you probably can't see down there. But there's a, if you look down into the fuse, you'll see a percussion cap there, and then it's sealed off on the bottom. There was supposed to be a slider cap that went on here that would be screwed in, and then when this was flying in towards the enemy, the force would cause the slider to go back and to hit the percussion cap, which would ignite the powder and blow this whole thing up. This one has the slider cap in it, as you can see. See, there's the difference. The one on this side has a slider cap, this one does not. Now, because both of these had have the fuses intact and water, we couldn't be sure that water had gotten into the chamber. These shells had to be drilled and the powder flushed in order to render them inert and to make sure they're safe. So these shells are absolutely safe. They're emptied of gunpowder. Now we're going to talk about 4 Confederate shells here. So these two are identical, except different types of fuses here. So this one here, this is a Confederate reed shell. I don't know if you can see it there, but it actually has the lathe lines on it. This is very, very well preserved shell. And it has a fuse adapter. So this is completely open from the powder chamber to the fuse adapter. So when I got it out of the water, it was completely safe. Filled with water, gunpowder is ruined. So I got the gunpowder out of there, but it doesn't need to be drilled when it has the fuse adapter like that. This also, it's interesting. It has a little bit of a leather gasket around here, which I don't know how common that is, but I can see the leather when I cleaned it that it was kind of still present underneath the top of the fuse there. The wrought iron rotating band on this sheared off when it was fired out of the cannon. I don't know if you can see that, but it's kind of broken here on the bottom. So I'll talk about that and why that's significant in a second. So we have another shell, very much like that first one, except this one has had a wood fuse that is got all wrecked on the top there instead of the brass fuse adapter. This one also had a wrought iron rotating band. This one's more intact, but it is dented on this side, and you can see if you look carefully that it's deformed in the areas where the rifling groove on the inside of the cannon of the 3-inch gun cut into this when it was fired. All right, now these two are pretty interesting here. And I'm going to start with this one. This shell here is very similar to the first two Confederate ones I just showed you, with the exception of it's got this lead plug here. This is called a side loader. So this shell is filled with that case shot, like the Dyer shell that I showed you. So this is filled with case shot designed to explode over the heads of the enemies. It's got that fuse adapter, like the first Confederate shell right here. However, this one is like I said, it has a case shot in it, and it also weighs quite a bit more, probably about 12 pounds, I think, when I weighed it. These other ones weigh 9 pounds. This also has the wrought iron sabot on it. The sabot on this one is pretty intact. It's deformed from being fired, but it didn't shear off after it came out of the cannon barrel. This shell is pretty interesting. This is a different kind of Confederate reed designed to be fired out of the same cannon as the other three I showed you, except it's pretty ingenious how they designed this. So the first thing is, when the wrought iron sabot kept breaking off in mid-flight, they realized shifting to a softer metal like brass was a better design, because the brass, while you can see the indentations from the rifling in the cannon kind of cut into that, because the brass is soft, it didn't shear off and break as it was coming out of the cannon. So they switched to this design, I believe it was mid-1863. And it's kind of cool, if you look at it from the bottom, you can see where each of the rifling grooves, I think there are 7 on the 3-inch gun that cut into this. Additionally, I showed you on that second shell here, I think it was, which shell was it? Maybe it was this shell, yeah, the first one. It's got the lathe lines on it because it had to be finished on a lathe, because the Confederates could not make these precise enough to ensure that they were exactly 2.99 inches in diameter. So when they designed this new design of the reed in 1863, they realized that they could make the shell, they could cast it in the mold, and then not have to finish the whole thing on a lathe, but just finish these 2 rings called borelets on the lathe. And that would ensure, because the rings are larger than the shell itself, if they were exactly 2.99 inches, then it could work in the cannon, and you didn't have to tool the entire shell. It saved a lot of tooling time and manufacture time to make these shells. Also, this one has a wood fuse, and I was able to save this wood fuse. I was able to get it out of the shell by drying it. I believe that's made of apple, I think, from my research. And that would have had the paper time fuse in it. And then it would have been pounded with a mallet into the shell before it was fired. This is definitely one of my favorite shells. Really, really like this one. And you can see how poor the Confederate Confederate iron was, because there's bubbling in the cast iron, which is a sign of very poor quality iron. It kind of just shows you, the Confederates really had a hard time sourcing materials during the war, and their materials, their shells, just generally were not as high quality as Union manufacture. Okay, let's talk about some of the reference books I have here. So I have 2 books that I use for bullets. I have Bullets Used in the Civil War by Stanley Phillips. This is an old one. And then Handbook of Civil War Bullets and Cartridges by James and Dean Thomas. I use this probably more than anything to identify different kinds of bullets. And then we have two different reference guides for artillery shells. This one is a really good quick guide to Civil War artillery projectiles by Jack Melton, Lawrence Paul. This is a really handy book to have. And then much more in-depth is Field Artillery Projectiles of the American Civil War by Thomas Dickey and Peter George. This is a really good reference book. It has all different kinds of shells and sabots and everything else in it. Really valuable to, and they have a whole thing on fuses in here too. Really, really valuable to have as reference material. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I enjoyed making it. Hope it was informative. Like I said, check out Aquachigger's videos on this stuff. He's taught me a tremendous amount, both when I've been metal detecting with him and watching his videos. So he's definitely the expert here, but I just want to share what I know about these shells, the musket, the bullets, and other things that I found. I hope to get out and make some more videos on the land in the coming weeks and months as we get into the cold of winter. I have a couple new permissions I'm excited about. So stay tuned for those videos, and I'll see you guys soon.